Will training camp continue or is about to open next week, and we're continuing our preview of training camp opening since you'll be off for the next couple of days, taking your last little break before the Vikings consume everything about your life over the next 5 months. So let's continue our preview. We did storylines the other day, the top storylines we'll be watching heading into camp. So let's talk about the most interesting players that you'll be keeping your eye on throughout the month of August as training camp and preseason goes on. So where do you want to start today?
Yeah, there's going to be some crossover between the storylines and the players. We'll try to switch it up a little bit as well. But if we're going to talk the 10 most interesting players in Vikings training camp. There's no other way to start again than with JJ McCarthy, who all eyes are going to be on him. We don't have to spend a ton of time talking about JJ McCarthy. Everybody knows that he is going to be in the spotlight at TCO Performance Center over the 3-4 weeks of training camp. We discussed the other day, we probably going to get some preseason action as well. Just on a day-to-day basis, what does he look like? How is he commanding the offense? Is he throwing to all three levels of the field with accuracy and anticipation? And it'll be one of those things, again, where we don't want to overreact too much to one day or one interception or one touchdown or whatever it is. But really, really going to be exciting to watch the Vikings' first, young franchise quarterback in a long, long time.
It'll be interesting to see how he handles the amount of attention that'll be on him. Because, yes, he was the star quarterback at Michigan, and we know Michigan football's heavily watched. But the NFL is a completely different level, and so it'll be very interesting to see how he handles all that attention on him over the next month. And as it grows throughout the season, it'll be very interesting to watch him develop under that spotlight. So as you said, we talked a lot about JJ McCarthy, and I'm sure we will over the next month and couple months. So who else are you watching? Who else comes up next for players that you'll be interested to watch throughout the next month?
Well, let's just cross off the other obvious box of the other 2024 first-round pick in Dallas Turner, who, we've talked about him plenty as well. The hype has been building for a year two breakout for a guy who they traded up multiple times, essentially, to land. They traded so much to get a guy who was really, really productive at Alabama, 10 sacks as an 18-year-old freshman in the SEC, and just really, did a ton of really good things in college and was projected as, potentially going to be the first defensive player off the board in that draft. And it ended up being a ton of offensive players going, which pushed the defensive guys down, and the Vikings made the bold move, the Superman glasses, Clark Kent, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah quote, to go take a swing and get him. And, of course, we know that he didn't play a ton as a rookie. He was behind an All-Pro in Andrew Van Ginkel and an All-Pro caliber player in Jonathan Grenard, a couple Pro Bowlers. So part of that makes plenty of sense. But with Pat Jones gone this offseason, the path is there for Turner to be the number 3 and to play 500, 600 snaps. Brian Flores said earlier this offseason, he looks at it like having 3 starters in that outside linebacker room. There is a ton of hype around Dallas Turner in year 2 and all the different ways that the Vikings can use him, because he's not just an edge rusher. They've taught him some of the Andrew Van Ginkel stuff, which involves dropping into coverage, lining up at various spots. He has the athleticism to do it. There was a play in the offseason program, OTAs, where Turner ran like 20 yards down the middle of the field and broke up a pass. So it's going to be really exciting, and he is one of those X-factor guys that, this Vikings defense we know is going to be good, or at least we are pretty sure it's going to be good, given what they've done in the 2 years under Flores and what they added this offseason. But if Turner is the guy who they think he can be in year 2, and he doesn't have to obviously be in his prime peak self yet at 22 years old, but if he takes that leap, this defense could be really, really dangerous.
What do you need to see from him at camp to know or to feel comfortable that this guy's going to take a leap in year 2, that we're going to see more from him than we saw in his rookie season? We're going to see better play from. What do you want to see from him at camp to make you feel comfortable saying that, hey, this kid's going to take a big leap? I know we've heard the coaches talk all about him over the past couple months during the off season, and we've heard the players talk about his development, but what do you want to see from him?
Yeah, you just want to see flashes. the trench players can be a little tougher to evaluate in training camp when the pads come on and it's physical football, but it's not regular season going all out tackling all of those things football. So you just want to see flashes, whether that's in the 11 on 11 portions, if he's getting into the backfield for a fake sack, or maybe he's dropping into coverage some more in 11s or even 7 on 7 and making plays, or he's stuffing a run in those settings. Also in the one-on-one drills, I mean, he's going to be going against, Brian O'Neill and Justin School and the Vikings' other tackles, Darisaw, if he's out there. And you want to see some flashes from him in those, some good one-on-one reps and winning with various different pass rush moves. So it doesn't have to be like complete dominance or consistent just a wow, but you want to see some flashes that make you encouraged heading into the season.
For sure. All right, who comes up next for you as one of the most interesting players to watch heading into August?
Yeah, a guy who was the Vikings' first acquisition of this free agency period on a relatively kind of medium-sized, under-the-radar deal was cornerback Isaiah Rodgers, who won the Super Bowl last year with the Eagles after serving a gambling suspension. Previously, was a sixth-round pick who was ascending with the Colts. Um, he signed. It was the first move, so that brought a little bit of attention on mid March, whatever day free agency opened. But it was pretty quickly overshadowed by, oh wait, they got Ryan Kelly and Will Fries and Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave and all these guys in the trenches. But the Rodgers hype train has grown pretty steadily over the course of this offseason. When you hear Kevin O'Connell say, I think it was at the owners' meetings or something, that Brian Flores had a ton of conviction in this guy. That this was a guy who Brian Flores kind of pounded the table for the Vikings to go get. And O'Connell said, when Flores has done that in the past, he's got a pretty good track record. So no pressure, Isaiah. And then we heard from Flores himself in the offseason program that Isaiah Rodgers is a guy that he's liked for a long time since he was playing at UMass. And was a sixth-round pick, and he's all in on this guy. And I think that explains legitimately a lot about why the Vikings have made fewer moves at cornerback than some people might expect. They didn't go out and add a really big-name cornerback this offseason with losing Stephon Gilmore and Shaquille Griffin. They didn't draft one in the first round. They didn't draft one at all. They signed a couple undrafted guys, but they really seem to have a lot of faith in Isaiah Rodgers as a starting every down cornerback alongside Byron Murphy Jr. He's 27 years old. He's never played more than 525 defensive snaps in a season, but the PFF grades in those samples have been really, really good. The tape is good. He's fast as heck. I mean, he might do some returning for the Vikings, although I don't really know if you want him doing that if he's going to be an every down corner. But he's capable of being a return specialist, which tells you something about his athleticism. He's got ball skills. He can cover in man. He can cover in zone. So, I mean, I don't know nationally necessarily how many people are looking at Isaiah Rodgers heading into this year, but around here, the hype is growing, and we could see a really big season, I think, from number 2.
We talked in the last video about whether this could be a position that we see the Vikings make a move at and add a free agent during training camp. At what point are you going to start to feel like, after watching these guys, watching the cornerback room on the field, at what point will you start to feel like they're actually really comfortable at this position with the guys that they have, and they're not actually going to make a move after all? And because I think that's the group that we talked about, saying that this is going to be the most likely position that they're going to add at. Is there a point at which you just start to say, from what you've seen on the field, that this isn't going to happen?
Yeah, if we're a week or two into training camp and no move has been made, and it'll be a combination of watching the action on the field and, all right, how do these corners look? Rodgers specifically, Mekhi Blackman specifically, Jeff Okudah, guys like that, even like a Dwight McGlothern or guys further down the depth chart. How do they look in our untrained, semi-expert opinion from standing on the sidelines? And then what do the coaches say about him? If we're talking to Brian Flores, we're talking to Kevin O'Connell at these press conferences. can you get some sort of hints there? Because all we've heard so far is that they feel confident in this group, and sometimes it's hard to know, you know. Of course, they're going to say that, but is that truly the case? I don't know, but we might be able to get more of a sense of that over the first few weeks of training camp.
Who else comes up on your list of most interesting players to watch over the next month?
Yeah, it's easy to stick with newcomers because they're exciting. They're shiny new objects. They haven't been here before. But Jonathan Allen is a guy that I am really going to be watching. You could go either Allen or Hargrave here. You could go both. Both former Pro Bowl, elite level pass rushing defensive tackles. I think Allen, if I had to choose one that I thought was maybe going to have the better year, it might be Allen. He's a couple years younger than Hargrave. They both came off injuries last year, but Hargrave's was out for the season injury. Allen's was a significant injury but he was able to return and actually played really well in the Commanders' upset win over the Lions in the divisional round of the playoffs. Was really kind of wreaking havoc, looking like his old self, getting into the backfield in that game. So Jonathan Allen, if he can be, we said this the other day, if he can be 75, 80, 85, 90% of the Jonathan Allen that we've seen in the past, he's going to be the Vikings' best interior pass rusher since maybe Kevin Williams. I mean, that's how good he is. It'll all come down to staying healthy, how much juice he has left. You never know with guys who are getting up there in age, but he has this it's a rip, chop, or hump move or so. I forget exactly what it's called, but he has this pass rush move that other Vikings players just rave about, having seen it up close. Offensive linemen, fellow defensive linemen. It's just this unstoppable move that he's used and perfected over the years, and it's going to be fun. Again, like it's a little bit tough to watch the trench guys compared to like the receivers and cornerbacks, but I'll be keeping a close eye on Allen in team periods and one-on-ones, and just I don't know. We haven't had a really good pass rushing defensive tackle to watch at Vikings training camp in quite some time, and now there might be two of them.
Allen, Phillips, Hargrave, kind of those are the expected top three for defensive tackles for the Vikings. Do we see anybody else slotting into that rotation, or is it going to be those three up top, and then kind of everybody filling in sporadically here and there?
No, there'll be a rotation. Now, you always want to use a rotation on the defensive line to keep guys fresh, especially when you're talking about Allen, Hargrave, and Phillips all being a little bit up there in years. They're all veterans. And the Vikings have some young depth. Jalen Redmond is a guy the former UFL player who really flashed at times last year. Taki Taimani, former undrafted guy, he can kind of be that backup nose tackle behind Phillips. And then Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins was their 5th-round pick this year out of Georgia. He is a guy who they really, really like, and I think he has some intriguing tools to learn and develop behind those guys. So those would be kind of the three main backups. Maybe Levi Drake Rodriguez, former 7th-round pick as well, but yeah, they've got some young depth there that can rotate in.
So far, McCarthy, Dallas Turner, Isaiah Rodgers, and a mixture of Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave. Who's next for you on guys you'll be keeping an eye on coming up in training camp?
Yeah, and sticking with newcomers, the easy one I would say would be Donovan Jackson, the 1st-round pick. But I don't know exactly how much we'll be able to see. Again, just with the nature of training camp and trench play. So I mean, Donovan Jackson can go on this list. He's a 1st-round pick. He has a chance to be a really, really good left guard for the Vikings and kind of complete their offensive line. But the guy that I wrote down was Ty Felton, the 3rd-round pick, the Kirk Cousins pick, in a sense that they got the comp pick for Cousins signing with Atlanta. Really a kind of unusual combination of production in college. He had a huge season for Maryland, size, speed, that makes you wonder, like, okay, how did this guy drop out of the top 100 picks? And there's some questions with his route tree and the offense he played in at Maryland and some things like that. But Vikings are excited about him. And he has a chance by the way, to potentially be the number 3 wide receiver in game 1 of the season if Jordan Addison winds up suspended. And you're talking about Jefferson, Jalen Naylor, and insert number 3 guy here. I mean, that could easily be Ty Felton. It could be Rondell Moore, or it could be Tim Jones, a veteran they signed, or it could be somebody else emerging. But I think Ty Felton's got as good a chance of anybody to be in that role. So big training camp for him. Excited to see what the routes look like, what his hands look like. Can he, does he get some reps with the ones with JJ McCarthy, and what does that chemistry look like? So yeah, Donovan Jackson on the list, but Ty Felton certainly as well when you're talking about the Vikings rookie class.
Is there a competition? I know you said there's a potential he could be wide receiver 3 on day 1 of the season because of the looming suspension for Jordan Addison. But is there a competition overall for that wide receiver 3 spot with Jalen Naylor there? He caught 28 balls for 414 yards, 6 touchdowns last year, so made an impact a little bit from that wide receiver 3 spot. Is there potentially a competition for that, or is Felton more insert other wide receiver depth here really just competing for wide receiver 4 at this point?
I think it's possible. You don't ever want to unless it's super obvious stars, like say anything is set as far as the depth chart. I do think that Jalen Naylor is pretty heavily the favorite to be that number 3 guy with what he did last year, scoring touchdowns. There were some drops here and there, but he's a guy who's been in the offense. They drafted him in that 2022 draft that really has not landed much of anybody else, but he's still around, and he's going into his 4th year in Kevin O'Connell's offense. He knows it really well. He's in a contract year, so there's that extra motivation. He showed up to the offseason program looking noticeably a little bit like he'd put on some muscle, rocking a new number, by the way, number 1, not number 83, which I think just is a big improvement to the aura. Jalen Naylor, I think, pretty heavily is the favorite to be the number 3 guy. But you never know. I mean, what if Ty Felton comes out and just shines? The reality is that Naylor probably isn't going to be here after this season. So there is a world where Felton could push him for that role. I just don't expect that to happen this year. I think that'll be a 2026 thing.
Right. Who are some of the lower down the depth chart, maybe the UDFAs that you're keeping an eye on? I know you've written extensively profiles over on Vikings on SI of these UDFAs. So who are some of the UDFAs that you're keeping an eye on that could make the roster coming out of training camp?
Yeah, I love the UDFAs. This is my one of my favorite things is
they've been pretty successful for the Vikings over the last couple of years. So
yeah, I mean, we know the stars and we know some of the depth backup guys who have been around, but I think the UDFAs are really cool because they all have interesting stories, interesting backgrounds. They're all inherently kind of long shots to make the team, but then out of nowhere you can get an Ivan Pace Jr., who was one of the best defensive rookies in the league in 2023, and has emerged as a key piece for the Vikings now going into his 3rd year. There's a bunch of them this year. One that I would highlight off the bat is Zemiah Vaughn, who plays the cornerback position that we've been talking about that is pretty wide open. Vaughn is a 6'2 guy, lanky build, played at Utah, and just really flashed in the offseason program. He made a bunch of plays, seemed to always be around the ball. And so he is a guy who, when you're talking about the cornerback room behind those first few guys, like anybody could emerge and make this roster and maybe even play. And that includes an undrafted rookie in Zemiah Vaughn, who seems like a really good fit for a Brian Flores defense. Instincts playing in zone, straight line speed, length, all of these different things. So that he'd be the first guy that I would highlight among that UDFA group.
Anybody else that we haven't covered so far? We've got McCarthy, Turner, Rogers, Allen Hargrave, Jackson, Felton, Zemiah Vaughn. Now, who else? Is anybody else on your list that you're keeping an eye on coming up when training camp opens next week?
Yeah, one guy I was going to say before we got into UDFAs, Theo Jackson is a guy who has a really big opportunity in front of him. The Vikings did with him what they did with Josh Metellus before the 2023 season and extended him basically on kind of a vote of faith, and paid him almost starter level money despite the fact that he hasn't played a whole lot. But Theo Jackson, behind the scenes, is a guy they claimed off of the Titans practice squad in 2022 when Lewis Cine got hurt. And all he's done since then is really impress people behind the scenes, whether he was just playing on the scout team or, doing things in training camp. And when he's gotten a chance to play, he had an interception against the Eagles as a rookie, and he had an interception against the Seahawks last year. And so he is a guy who there's a lot of buzz around. And now, obviously, with Cam Bynum going to Indianapolis, there's a clear path for Theo Jackson to be a starter, every down type player alongside Harrison Smith and Josh Metellus. And the Vikings feel like that he can do that without really missing much of a beat, despite Cam Bynum being a guy who got a 14, 15 million a year deal from Indianapolis. So Theo Jackson will be a guy. I've had my eyes on him over the past few training camps, but this year is a different level because of the opportunity in front of him.
For sure. I mean, as you mentioned, Cam Bynum gone, so there's a lot of open snaps there after Bynum's departure. One other UDFA for that you're keeping an eye on before I got a couple questions about some other guys down the roster.
Yeah, there's some other bigger name UDFAs, if they can be big names at all. I mean, Max Brosmer, obviously. Guys like Ben Urasek, the tight end, Tyler Batty, the BYU defensive end, Logan Brown, the tackle. I'll go with a super, super deep cut here. Elijah Williams is a defensive tackle out of Morgan State, an FCS school. He really, really impressed at the HBCU Bowl this offseason. Didn't get signed by anybody, didn't get drafted, didn't get signed by anybody as an undrafted free agent, but he came to Vikings rookie minicamp and impressed enough to get a contract out of it. He was the only tryout player. They signed 2 tryout players out of that. One of them was since waived. So he's the only tryout player from rookie minicamp who's still around on the roster. By definition, the longest of long shots, but he's a guy with some real athletic juice despite being a little undersized for the position. And that's one where, every position, there's battles for roster spots, and you don't bring a guy on your 90-man roster to training camp unless he has some degree of a chance to impress you and earn a roster spot, if not at least a practice squad spot. So Elijah Williams, deep sleeper there to keep an eye on.
You mentioned Max Brosmer there. He was one guy I had a question on going into camp, and I know there's a couple quarterbacks in front of him on the roster. Do we expect him to make the roster coming out of camp? And if so, what does he need to do that to make the roster? I know he's got Rippon, he's got Howell, he's in front of him. What does he need to do to impress the Vikings coaching staff to make the roster as quite a big long shot to make it at that position?
Yeah, he just has to, play well and do what he does best, which is use his intelligence, use his football IQ, read the field, throw with anticipation and accuracy, prove that he has a level of kind of mastery of the Vikings offense. I think that's his path. What Kevin O'Connell's praised is how quickly he picked things up when he came to the Vikings. And if he can prove that he has a veteran-like command of the offense, I think that's his path to overcoming a Brett Rippon as QB3, because Rippon has been around for a little bit and has that veteran experience and has also been praised by Kevin O'Connell for, how well he knows the playbook and knows the offense. My expectation with Brosmer is that he will be the QB4 and the Vikings will try to keep him on the practice squad, and they will hope like heck that nobody tries to claim him or poach him or anything like that. But I think they want to keep him around. And if there's some worry about losing him, then maybe they would keep 4 quarterbacks on the active roster. I don't know. But I think he's probably the QB4, but I think they want to keep him around.
All right. Last question for me. One from way outside left field here. Punter battle. We've got Oscar Chapman, and then we've got Ryan Wright. Ryan Wright kind of up and down over the past couple years. What do we expect? Are we actually going to get a punter battle? Is this going to be taken seriously, or is Oscar Chapman there just because he's the reserve international slot, so he doesn't really count against the roster?
A little bit of both. It helps that he doesn't count against the 90-man roster. He's the 91st man. But I think we could have a real punter competition. I have no idea what to expect from Oscar Chapman. I haven't watched any of his punting tape at Auburn. I don't even really know his statistics, but they must have been good enough for the NFL to take some notice. And I do know that Ryan Wright has been a little bit inconsistent since he himself was an undrafted guy who beat out, I think it was Jordan Berry, maybe a few years ago for the Vikings punter job. He has a big leg. I mean, we've seen like 70-yard punts from him, especially in preseason action. That's happened a couple times. But it's about placing it in the right spot and having the right hang time and not maybe out kicking your coverage or under kicking your coverage team. And there's been some inconsistency in terms of the placement and just the execution of what Matt Daniels wants. So I think there could be a competition. I'll be paying attention whenever there's punting happening, both to who's punting it and how that looks, and then also to who's back there catching and returning it.
According to Sports Reference and College Football Sports Reference, Oscar Chapman last year was 13th in the SEC in average yards per punt at 42.5 behind obviously 12 other guys. So
that doesn't seem great, but it could probably go beyond the numbers.
Yeah, probably. I'm looking forward to this camp.
Gotta watch the tape.
This could be a very interesting camp. I know it feels like there's a lot of positions already set in stone, but some of these depth pieces for Minnesota should be very interesting. Will, appreciate you stopping by today. Yep. I've got a crying kid here, so I'm going to go deal with that. Go read the rest of Will's work over at Vikings, Twins, Timberwolves, and Gophers on SI. Hit subscribe to the channel. It does help us get found. Also notifies you every time we post a new video here to the channel. We'll talk to you tomorrow with another topic across the Minnesota sports. Good night.